Okay, so I've just been watching an episode of Cold Feet, which is a British sitcom drama series from 1997 to 2003. It was pretty popular at its peak, basically about six 30-somethings living in Manchester. Good series if you get a chance to ever watch it. It's good insight, I think, into British life at that time. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Cold Feet. I wanted to raise an issue which was brought up in one of the episodes, and it was only a reference to it, but it was workplace bullying. Now this is something that can of course be found all over the world, but I'm focusing specifically on the UK with this video because, well, I'm British. I believe this is a huge scourge in our society, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that really strikes me about this. First of all, often when the issue is spoken about, people often respond that it's a case of people who are too sensitive or they can't handle the pressure, that sort of thing. But I think it's very important to make a clear differentiation between, for instance, a boss expecting results and expecting his or her employees to be efficient. There's a clear difference between that and a point where they are constantly running people down, constantly belittling them, humiliating them, and intimidating them. A good boss is one who, of course, will have control, some sort of control, and a leadership quality, which would obviously require a certain amount of demanding or expecting people to do things. But there's a difference between that and the approach of just running people down, making them feel intimidated and basically making their life in that workplace a misery. It's not just bosses who bully, sometimes that's an interpretation. Indeed, you might even have a situation on occasion whereby the boss himself is being marginalised and put in a position whereby they're having to deal with a very difficult workforce who are actually making their life very difficult. So I think it's wrong to assume that all bullying comes from above. Bullies in a workplace could be anyone. They could be fellow employees, they could be young or old, they could be male or female. In fact, there's been a lot of reports that female bullying bosses are actually very ruthless towards other women, and the sort of bullying, women on women bullying, is something that's a big issue. So that's another false assumption that it's always men. But they all have one thing in common. It's about trying to feel good about themselves by controlling other people. And it's exactly the same approach that playground bullies use in a school. When we talk about bullying, it's often assumed that that's this environment in school. We think about children being bullied, and as adults that's concerning. But what we fail to remember is that actually this is a very widespread problem among adults as well. Now, in a busy work environment, you're going to get situations where people are stressed out and maybe lose their temper, and there's a high level of expectations in somewhere like a restaurant. But when that gets to the point of that sort of behaviour, intimidation, constant ridicule, wearing people down, that's not harmless. It's really not, because the effects of this are huge health effects. Actually lower productivity, because someone who hates their working environment is going to be less efficient than someone who feels okay about going to that working environment, because they're going to hate it and it is going to impact the way they work. And then it's a cycle, because their superiors get more pissed off because they think the person's doing a bad job, but they fail to recognise the conditions that are influencing that, and ultimately it can lead to suicide. I believe strongly, I've argued this before, that we should be a compassionate society. People should not confuse that with weakness. And incidentally, this has got nothing to do with the nanny state. It's not about wrapping people in cotton wool. There's certain jobs that do require, let's say, tougher skin than other jobs. Obviously, someone who wants to be a police officer or a soldier, or other jobs that are physically demanding, psychologically demanding, they can't be fragile people. That goes without saying. But the problem with bullying is it's another naive assumption that the bullying victims are all weak, fragile people. That's completely misguided. Anyone anyone can find themselves in this position. You could consider yourself a tough person, but still be in a situation where your life's being made hell. So it's wrong to assume that they bring it on themselves because they're fragile people or something like that. Um, I know that this isn't a word that should be thrown around, bullying. I know there's situations where, for example, if there's real reason for a boss to be angry, he or she is entitled to be. You know, they're under pressure to meet targets and so on, and provide a service to the public, so they're under pressure. But as a nation, we need to accept that this is a reality, that every single day many people go to work dreading what they're going to experience because of the bullying that they face, either from a boss or from fellow employees. And it sickens me. I've had some personal experience of it, albeit not on a very big scale, but I have had some experience of it as a waiter. I had to put up with kitchen staff who would constantly swear in your face, that sort of thing. I had it on a relatively small scale. I have to say the catering industry, I believe, is one of the worst places for it. It's an industry that is not very well regulated, not scrutinised. There's a huge amount of exploitation takes place, and I've argued before why being a waiter is such a soul-destroying job. And this is not, I'm not talking down to anyone out there who is a waiter. I say that because I've been in this position 3 times. I know what it's like. But I would argue it doesn't matter what the job is, whether that be a high-flying city worker or a low salary waiter in a mediocre restaurant, whatever the job is, cleaner, whatever, there is no excuses for that sort of behaviour from fellow workers or an employee or an employer. And as a nation, we need to take this on. I want to see more politicians taking it on. I'm not saying they're not, but I want to see this become a much bigger issue, because at the moment it is massively underreported, and I believe it has a huge effect on people. And the worst thing is, it's just not needed. There's absolutely no evidence that it makes people work better. There's nothing at all to suggest that it's justified. It's not about wrapping people in cotton wool. It's just about unnecessarily making someone's life a misery. I hate bullies. I always have hated bullies. I hate people who think that they can control others in that sort of way. A good boss, a good CEO is someone who will inspire their workforce, who will treat their workforce fairly. And if I was the CEO of a company, I would take a zero tolerance approach to bullying of any sort. I mean that. But I think another part of the problem is, as a nation, we glorify it. We hold up people, certain celebrities, let's say, who are nasty individuals, who are frankly bullies in terms of the way they approach things. We hold them up as if they're some sort of role models, as if they're admirable eccentrics. A good example would be Gordon Ramsay, the chef. I don't care if his food tastes like manna from heaven. I think he's a piece of shit. And how do I base that sort of slur? Well, I base it on the fact that every single time I've seen one of his shows, I haven't watched full shows, but I've seen clips from his programs, he's always shouting in someone's face. He's always belittling someone, telling them they're worth less than him. Oh, you son, when I was your age, I was 10 times the man you were. This sort of thing. He runs people down. Gordon Ramsay is a bully. There's no other way to escape it. And people say, oh, he only does it for the cameras. As if that's, even if it is a big act, it still sends out the message that to be successful as a business person, you need to be a bully. Number one, it's not true, because there's many successful chefs who don't take his approach. And number two, people say, oh, well, the apprentices or whatever, they go on the show. Right, that may be true, they go on voluntarily. But for me, the issues are wider. It's about sending out the message to society that if you're a bully, you're going to get far. So I think it's a contradiction when elements of the media talk about, oh, let's take on workplace bullying, let's talk on bullying, but at the same time we're going to prop up people like Gordon Ramsay. To me, that's just, and the same applies to shows like the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, which is why I never watch them, because I honestly believe that, you know, the contestants who are not very good, that's, well, frankly, some of them are rubbish. Okay, why do they broadcast those auditions? The sole reason is so that people can laugh and ridicule them. They should be judged at the early stage. If they're not good enough, don't let them go through. But what happens is the judges let them go through for ratings, so people can laugh at them. Okay? These people are deluded, they don't know they're bad. The friends tell them they're good and they believe it. But the judges only care about ratings. The producers only care about ratings. Therefore, if some, let's say, simple person who's doing something that clearly has no talent, they're put through in order to be laughed at, and then they're jeered off the stage. And I hate to see that, because the smug studio audience, it's like, you know, if you saw a child in the playground, if you saw that happening, like a gang surrounding a child, most adults would condemn that, right? So what's the big difference here? The problem is shows like that, in my opinion, glorify and promote bullying by saying, if you're different, if you're not good at something, then you deserve to be ridiculed and laughed at. And to me, that's just, it's abhorrent. You know, people could think I'm being a namby-pamby liberal, or I'm being puritanical or something, but I really see this as a big problem. And as a society, we need to have compassion. We need to recognise this as a problem, and not encourage it, not promote it, not endorse it. I know there's other people out there who see where I'm coming from, and it's got nothing to do with being a nanny state. I am not suggesting that people be wrapped in cotton wool. I'm not saying that people should never be criticised. Goodness knows, I criticise others, but what happens in this country is we do not condemn bullying the way it should be condemned. It should be something that is stigmatised. If you're a bully, you should be stigmatised in order to change your behaviour, because it's really, you know, I'm someone who has a bad temper, and I blow my casket occasionally, but what I do not do is I do not intimidate and run down people who can't defend themselves. Yeah, I have a temper, I may lose patience if I'm in an argument, that sort of thing, but there's a difference between that and having the sort of control over people that you see from the likes of Gordon Ramsay, Jeremy Kyle. There's plenty of others. Another example would be that Scottish comedian, Frankie Boyle, you know, making jokes about terminally disabled children, and then people find that funny. To me, that says something about society. We're going to laugh at, it's sick. And you know, it's not, I'm not being square. I don't mind edgy humour, but I do think there's a limit. And I would say to any of those guys to their face, I think you're trash. I have no respect for you. And the silly, sheepish people who follow them and say, "Oh, why are you criticising him?" as if they're above criticism. Fuck them. I would say to their face, Jeremy Kyle, Gordon Ramsay, Frankie Boyle, as far as I'm concerned, three thoroughly vile individuals, I would say to their face what I think of them. And I swear, if I am ever in a high profile position, I'm going to try hard not to waste it. I'm going to raise these issues. And I don't care how people judge me, I'm going to raise these issues, because they're important and someone has to. Thank you for watching.